Diving into the second hour of the program, my name's Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. If I have this right, on the phone with me should be Stephen Klein from Wyoming Liberty Group. Is this you?
Sure is, Glenn.
It sure is. You've had a busy day.
It is a busy day in Wyoming, man. A lot going on, that's for sure.
That's good because, we got to keep you off the streets. So this was a fortunate event, I think, here. I just had Cindy Hill on about a half hour ago. Came on just to give her reaction. And for those just joining me, what's happened is the Wyoming Supreme Court has made a ruling on the Cindy Hill issue, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and we were looking, Steve, at that ruling here. Cindy seems to think that she has won everything. They had several points that they had to rule on. How did she win everything? Does she have her job back?
Well, the question is now it has to head back to district court, and they have to proceed with the edict that SF104 is overturned in its entirety. And in that way, the court has made a very narrow ruling. It took a look at SF104, despite the fact that it's a humongous bill, and they said, well, no, this is unconstitutional. It violates the constitutionally granted power to the superintendent of schools to oversee public instruction. So it's in that sense, it's narrow. I mean, it's a big deal because it overturned a really big law that replaced our superintendent and transferred her power to an appointee of the governor. But so in that sense, it's very narrow. And in another sense, it's big because it was such a big brouhaha over SF104. And I can say right now, it's a big cap in the Wyoming court's feather in their cap because they, unlike Obamacare, they didn't dig into this big law and pick and choose what's constitutional and what's not. They are going to leave that for the legislature. So I don't know the exact process, Glenn, going forward, but the point is, if 104 is overturned, I'm pretty sure she's got all her old powers back.
Yeah, one of the questions I was asking, and I pointed out that I teased the governor, which is maybe why he doesn't come on this program anymore. I gave him a hard time saying that, hey, you put Cindy in a museum because she's in the Barrett building. Yeah. And so I asked, well, when, Cindy, do you think you're going to get your old office back along with all the powers? And her opinion was very soon. She has to meet with the governor at some point. She's already got people setting up that meeting. And then she should be able to just move back into her old office. And so what you're saying, though, is it still has to go through another court system. So, I mean, what are we talking, months here? How long would this be?
No, I think they're going to move expeditiously, and I think now that the court has spoken unequivocally, I don't think there's going to be too much. The Wyoming Supreme Court, and this is a decision on the Wyoming Constitution. There's nowhere really left to go, Glenn.
Right.
You can't go to the United States Supreme Court to determine a Wyoming constitutional issue. So I think they understand. Now, I want to emphasize, because especially this was a narrow ruling, because there's you can get online and linked in many places about 80-page printout here, and 40 or so pages is the majority opinion, which was joined by 3 justices, and then there's a concurrence that's only a few pages. That's 2 justices, so who agreed with them but wanted to write their own little thing, and then you have a dissent, which was 2 judges. So this is only a 3-2 ruling. This was a pretty close call, and it's important. The concurrence itself emphasizes, we're here to decide the constitutionality of SF104. We're not here issuing an advisory opinion for the next steps for the legislature to take. And because this is because SF104 was so comprehensive and reallocated so many powers, duties previously given to the superintendent to this, the director of education, Rich Crandall, because that happened, that's not to say that legislature can't come back and maybe try it again, try less powers. I think given the political backlash against 104, even while it was being debated, and certainly in the year since it was passed, I don't think that's very likely. But that's, again, this is not I appreciate the court making a very concerted effort, especially in the concurrence. That's the 4 pages here in the middle of this big 80 bulk, to say, listen, all right, we have this very simple question before us, and there's obviously a lot of reasoning here. They go into legislative history, they go into cases from other courts, they go into the dictionary from 1892. They're all over, they have a lot of things to back this up, but ultimately they're deciding this one thing. They're not really, that'll probably have a lot of wide-ranging implications going forward. But and and again, I'm like you, Glenn. I mean, I stand corrected. I really didn't go pay too much attention to this suit as it was going on. I looked at and I have not had the time to actually read the dissent yet, which I'll be diving into in a little while. But it's the majority opinion overall is very tightly constructed. They've really put together a lot of evidence. It's not perfect, and it does beg the question that the legislators are going to be scratching their heads over. Well, over the years, there have been many different duties assigned to the superintendent. Is every one of those going to raise a constitutional issue? So there'll be a certain amount of uncertainty, but I think ultimately they did. This is the reason it took so long to get this opinion. It's pretty obvious that there was a lot of back and forth between the justices. Obviously, some very stark disagreement because we have such a comprehensive dissent and a comprehensive majority opinion. But at the end of the day, I certainly think wherever you come down on this issue, you can't say that either side didn't have a case, because we got 40 pages of arguments for both sides in the decision.
I'm talking with Stephen Klein from Wyoming Liberty Group, who's good enough to call in after a very busy day and give us his opinion on this. Let's you and I just for a moment, Steve, just the two of us here. Let's have a little talk. Okay. So we have this guy that was brought up from another state to take over this position, which was given another name, director or something like that. Holy cow, what happens to him now? And isn't the state in trouble because they signed a contract with the guy?
That's going, who knows? It could lead to future litigation, I imagine. I don't, I expect that the state is going to find to live up to its end of the bargain. I would hope they would go forward with that. Heavens knows plenty of that's gone on at the university lately.
Right.
We're handing out golden parachutes here.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about. Did they put something into the contract? You and I wouldn't know that they could give this guy some kind of an out. Here's some money. Thank you very much. Goodbye, because his office is closed.
Yeah, I hope so, but I have no more information than you do on that. The policy implications of this are obviously huge. And that kind of ties into what my coworker Amy Edmonds has been doing here at Wyoming Liberty Group, along with a giant coalition of very concerned parents, and even Cindy Hill herself is really opposing the Common Core curriculum.
Well,
That's a paradigm shift if there ever was one.
I was thinking about bringing that up. I was wondering if you wanted to, because this last weekend, Amy Edmonds came up here, and I was with her and Dr. Taylor Haynes, and we had a little meeting here in Gillette, Wyoming, which, by the way, packed the house, and it had to do with Common Core. And I look at Cindy Hill, she did say she still wants to run for governor. When she was on with me about a half hour ago,
really? Okay.
Yeah. She didn't say that she wasn't going to run for governor, that she was going to try to run for superintendent again. That's not what she said. She made it pretty clear to me anyway that she wants to continue her bid for governor. But in the meantime, though, we got to get all the way around to November, and here's the implementation of Common Core. Now, this gentleman, which apparently is out the door, he was a supporter of Common Core. He was going to implement it. Cindy wants to shut it down. So, again, just between you and me here, boy, this is going to get interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, the legislative session has now been, and again, there's things going on, and it's all a lot of speculation here, Glenn, and but you've heard, for example, I was curious, especially over the last week, why is the investigation stalled? Why? Because that was another thing that was mentioned. I think it gets mentioned in the opinion, but it certainly was true that, you pass this comprehensive law instead of, if you're really upset with this person's performance or you suspect malfeasance, you pursue impeachment, you pursue an investigation. And why are you doing, it was very cart before the horse here that let's, get her out of office by passing SF104 and then let's pursue an investigation. And that investigation surprisingly came to an abrupt halt. And I don't know if they had wind that this was coming down the pipeline or what, but there's certainly already, and again, Amy obviously knows much more about this than I do, but there's legislation that will be proposed on halting Common Core through legislation to rein in the State Board of Education's work on curriculum and things of that nature. So it has to be a paradigm shift now. Suddenly, Rich Crandall can come testify as a Wyoming resident if he wants to, but it's going to be,
Yeah.
It is for a fact. I mean, even if there is some transitional period, it really doesn't matter. He's either a lame duck or he's out.
Right. I'm talking with Stephen Klein from Wyoming Liberty Group, joining us about the Wyoming issue with Cindy Hill, Superintendent of Public Instruction, and the Supreme Court decision on this. So, okay, can they still go with impeachment on Cindy Hill? Because like you just said, they shut down the investigation. But I guess if they wanted to, after spending, over $1 million, they could continue with impeachment, couldn't they?
Yeah, they could. And there's also, I mean, you hear whiffs of a federal audit because among the allegations are misallocation of federal funds. So this stops none of that. But nevertheless, it's interesting. I read it from another reporter, and it's true if you look at other different cases. The legislature has not had a good time with its laws going to the Supreme Court over the last 20, 30 years. It seems that education has been a pretty hot button issue, and the Wyoming Constitution is very detailed on certain things about how education is, uniform public instruction and things like that. So it's been a pretty tough go of it. And I mean, we're looking at not just a gubernatorial election, not just a superintendent election, but every member of the House of Representatives is up for election. I believe half the Senate is up for election. So 104, I mean, was already a very controversial bill, and now you can expect reverberations that, hey, you passed a terrible unconstitutional law. So expect that to continue. But nevertheless, I mean, it's Glenn, and it's funny. I'm sitting here, we've heard this information for about 6 hours now. And combing through. I can tell you, going back to the opinion itself, I'm still very overall pretty impressed. I'm concerned about it, but the court was handed a very real live issue here that and I thought more, and I think the linchpin does hang on the reallocation, the transfer of another of the duties of the superintendent to a legislatively created post. And there was another way, and the court points this out. If you really wanted to do that, well, you should have changed the Wyoming Constitution. And that's a really hard thing to do compared to just passing a law.
Sure. Well, see, what jumped out to me, and I was just sort of skimming it because, I mean, I've had less time than you. I got a whole show to put together here. And one of the justices made some reference to, hey, this is an elected position, and you've taken away the people's vote, is essentially what he said, which is what I've been arguing all along. And I've said to Cindy Hill in person several times, look, trust me, Cindy, this has nothing to do with you. I mean, I like the lady personally, but I want my vote back. I don't really care if she's superintendent of public instruction next year or not. That wasn't not my concern. I want my vote back. And it seemed like one of the justices was pushing on that issue. Give the people their vote back. Yeah,
and I think that that's probably one of the most common sentiments I've certainly heard, and I've read, following Twitter today, there's a lot of not just news reporters, but plenty of Wyomingites on there as well, really kind of opining as a kind of live narration as I was reading this over, some of the more interesting things popping up. But yeah, it's overall, this is an opinion. I think there will be some good articles written about it in the Wyoming Law Review, and it will be because that line had to be drawn somewhere, and I think that's where when I said that linchpin about the transfer, that I kind of, there's, separation of powers issues, there's things that I do still have, some concern over, but I'm kind of glad that the Supreme Court drew this line. And there's one of the other things, going over the years is, it's kind of one of the arguments I heard over the months, is that we have a state auditor, for example, and we have a wholly separate Department of Audit. And years ago, a lot, if not pretty much all of the duties of our auditor, which is still a position, is now kind of assigned to the Department of Audit, appointed positions, and civil servants and whatnot. So but the thing was, they just didn't challenge it. You have to, this kind of emphasizes the importance of constitutional issues, that if nobody speaks out, if nobody speaks up, if nobody tries to draw that line in the sand, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's one thing we're doing here at Wyoming Liberty Group. We are in the middle of a lawsuit against the city of Cheyenne over limiting the number of signs you can have on your lawn. And that was implemented in the Unified Development Code in 2012, and finally we're standing up and saying, and everyone's wondering, hey, what are you doing? Why are you?
Right.
Because we're saying no, this is wrong. As small of it, you can talk big First Amendment issues, you can talk people really being shut down, but even limitations on your amount of speech, even time restrictions that serve no purpose whatsoever other than some bureaucrat's aesthetic principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are unconstitutional, and it's time to really stand up. So I give Cindy Hill credit here, because even I was very skeptical about this suit, and and she won, and more power to her.
Well, and first off, I'm very impressed that you were able to. You're getting good at this. Slip in a plug for Wyoming Liberty Group while you're at it, and
you can check us out at yliberty.org.
There
anytime.
You go. See, this guy's a pro at this point. This is great, and I know you're going to end up writing an article about it. And Maureen and I tend to coordinate on who the next guests up are. When you write your article on this decision, I would love to have you on the air because I know by then you'll have time to really sit down and pour through it, and we can nitpick exactly what happened here.
Excellent. I really look forward to it.
Thank you for coming on, Steve.